Well, good morning, everybody. Here's my plan for today's forecast video. I want to recap the severe weather event that, of course, just happened and make sure we understand the implications of it, including looking at the precipitation pattern out of that system, which was quite important for parts of the Corn Belt. We're going to stretch it out again, looking for any sort of a pattern shift as we head into the month of June, which is continuing to show up in the forecast models. And then I'm going to do a quick model comparison for the month of June from the GFS extended and the European extended. And at the very end, we're going to look at some global satellite data looking at NDVI, a normalized difference vegetation index or a vegetation health index, and compare it to a year ago. Okay, what have you been looking at for the last few minutes? This is just ahead of sunrise in the northern plains this morning. And last night, right here in this part of North Dakota, coming out of parts of Montana, we saw the winds drop off. I mean, some places the winds were absolutely ferocious yesterday, but where the winds calmed down, the skies cleared out, we watched temperatures just kind of bomb out. And just before sunrise, we had a few of our weather reporting stations that were showing in the low to mid 30s. So we got some 35s in through here. And what you need to understand, 35, 34 right there, is that where the stations are, maybe we didn't hit a frost, but any low-lying area in this region had frost risk this morning. There's another spot as well I want to show you, and that is down. So this is Colorado here, and coming off the Front Range, you start to see 35 here, 35, 35. We had just a few places that got down there that were in the plains, not in the mountains. Like these are up in the mountains here, of course, that touched freezing. So on the backside of this system, and some cold air that was kind of lining our western plains, giving us a very late season frost in these areas here, and I think down here as well. So I just want to bring that to your attention because the rest of this system produced, of course, a tremendous amount of nasty weather. So where do we sit today? Early this morning, well, these are our frost areas here and here. Why? We mentioned that the temperatures are getting cool here, but the clear skies helped things bottom out last night in a couple of areas, and the National Weather Service put out these frost advisories late last night for this morning. What we have on the backside, winter storm warnings out for parts of the northern Rockies here. Strong downslope winds. We have some strong winds to the south. There's still going to be considerable fire risks down here in parts of the southwest as we go forward. And as you take a look at where the flood watches have now been issued, this is going to give us an idea where the front is about to stall out. But yesterday's severe weather activity all throughout the Midwest was another one kind of, getting way up there in terms of total number of reports. We're nearly at 500 counts as of this morning. We're at 479. And while most of these were wind reports, we had multiple squall lines. Several of these storms, as we talked about, did start off with, single-celled or supercellular structure. Some of these wind gusts here were approaching 80 to 90 miles an hour, and I'm sure there were faster that were not reported, but a lot of damage from severe weather in this particular region. We added another 23 tornado reports, and I just wanted to show you my colleague Andrew Pritchard. When we have severe weather at Nutrien, Andrew's job, part of his job, is to be out if he can get to it and check on all of our facilities, make sure that he is right there with this system, putting out alerts for our company. And so this was one of the tornadoes he caught in Iowa. Here's another one here, just as he was checking in on some of our customer growers and our retail offices here. In addition to that, I'm sure you may have seen this in the news, but Andrew also drove past one of the large wind turbines that was destroyed here by the strong winds. In fact, one of them caught on fire. This is another one of Andrew's pictures, and I'll be interested to see some of the video content that he got as well, just to kind of get a flavor of how rough this was. Andrew's comments were pretty stark. He said it feels very apocalyptic in some of the places, the towns that he drove through and stopped to help folks that saw so much severe weather yesterday. But just thinking this through, there was a lot of hail in this as well. So you saw what some of the wind damage here did. But just in our last 3 days, just take a look at how much hail fell in the midsection of the country here. It was a lot. And this continues to be a spring where we are just way ahead of pace on the accumulation of severe weather damage reports. We're at 858 tornado reports. We are at almost 4,500 severe wind reports, 2,500, almost 2,600 severe hail reports. And there are very few places that, if you're kind of inside of this region, there are very few places that have missed out on a lot of this severe weather. Now, normally, as we progress into the month of June, our severe weather risk also pushes north. We start to see greater numbers starting to show up here the farther north you get. But this is just a quick look at where we stand so far in 2024. This is what yesterday's radar animation looks like, picking up kind of the second round of this system as it goes through parts of Iowa. Watch it as it restarts here again in a few moments. Remember, we had storms that came out of Nebraska, and here they are moving across Iowa. Severe weather made it up into Minnesota and Wisconsin. The storm line broke apart in parts of Illinois. Remember how we questioned that in the models yesterday? Whether or not this system, because of how quickly it was lifting, was going to be able to just keep it together here. Farther to the south, we saw more storm activity, but there was a region in through there where these storms did start to break apart. And it starts to become an important thing to have a conversation about if you are one of these Midwestern farmers where from the perspective it has been so incredibly wet, but there are regions within this that have been missed. So let's talk about the wet side of this first. Over the last 3 days, remember this was the second time we had severe weather in this region over the last 3 days. You can see the incredibly heavy rains from the central plains getting into western Corn Belt and now here into the upper Midwest. And there are places across Iowa that have seen 5 to 8 inches of rain. Some places locally maybe have seen more than that. But I'm starting to think about this. All right, there's this region, Missouri, parts of Illinois. And then we'll show other regions in just a few seconds, but those storms were so close, yet were unable to get through this area. Part of it was due to timing. Part of it was due to the environment. Remember, we had such incredibly windy conditions in this area. It may have gone through and mixed out the lower level to a greater depth. We also may have had problems with the cap in this area, and the storms couldn't get through that. That was part of it. There's more to this story that I have yet to learn, but I'm seeing the results of it. Areas that got missed, that honestly, there's some folks in here that needed to get this moisture. You can see them by looking at this last 14 days of percent of normal precipitation. Now remember, this does not include yesterday's rainfall. This only goes through yesterday morning. But just take note of these places in Illinois and Missouri. Come down here to parts of Oklahoma, Arkansas, pockets throughout the western Corn Belt that over the last 2 weeks have missed out. Now, some of this filled in. Some of this right in through here filled in yesterday. But it's important to note that this pattern has not been wet for everybody. And that is one of the big distinct differences between this wet spring and spring of 2019. Now, the places that need breaks in this, again, see how wet things have been down through this here. We've been quite wet into the mid-Atlantic, coming out of the Carolinas as well. Montana, you've got more moisture coming in here too very soon. But the West has gone into its dry season right now, and you can see that pretty clearly here in the last 14 days. But it's important to note that at this time of year, keeping track of rainfall anomalies on a 14-day schedule is extremely important, especially for areas that don't have deep soil that reserve a lot of water. Because when you look back, I mean, this is the last 30 days, you're like, man, it's just been wet. I mean, you just see most places in the white to blue shades with very limited regions. And we've talked extensively about these regions that continue to be missed, that have continued to show up in the red part of the color spectrum here, indicating below normal precipitation. We've got more information about that in just a few seconds here. But I just wanted to put that a bit into context. So today, this is it. This is still where our strong kind of combined jet stream pattern is coming through here. There's a bit of a subtropical flavor here to the south. Here's the polar branch, and it's making this hard turn right in here, which is where we're getting our best curvature dynamics to develop below. It helps that there's another jet streak on the top side of this, or the northern side of this. So starting in a few weeks, just to be honest with you, I mean, I'd guess it about 3 weeks from now, jet stream level dynamics are going to do two things. First of all, they're going to weaken. We're going to see a slowing of the winds. And we're just going to see this natural progression to the north of where the jet stream level flow is going to be. That's a normal seasonal transition. And what that's going to do is that's going to eliminate having monstrous low pressure systems like this one roll across the country, which is where we're going to see the tightest wind field here later on this afternoon. That means that these really well-defined fronts, like there's a big one that's right in through here. Can you see it? So the flow's coming around this side. It's running right parallel to it in through there, but that position right there, that's the front. That's where we're expecting all the severe weather to be today. But fronts like these are going to be gone. We're going to see much more subtle boundaries. We're going to see very small variations in the upper level height field. And it's a matter of looking at where the instability is and where the moisture is to see if you can get storms. So we're going to be moving away from these extremely well-defined frontal boundaries if we progress toward a normal summer. And I just want to tell you something. Normal summer, if we start to build in heat here and the flow comes over the top like I kept mentioning for the last several weeks, that is really a case where you have to do daily weather forecasting to figure out where the rain's going to be. Looking out a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we won't be able to do it with any sort of accuracy. So I just wanted to bring those things to your attention as we start to make a transition here. We're at the end of May, so we have to start talking about what this transition is going to look like. Okay, so that frontal boundary today is where the Storm Prediction Center has identified a large area of slight risk, which extends from this part of Ontario all the way through the Ohio River Valley down to the Red River Valley and eventually down here almost to south central Texas. As we get into tomorrow, again, we have another system behind this, which is going to see it link up with that front. That front sits right here tomorrow. And we start to recover the moisture. So there's a large area from South Dakota to Texas all the way over to western Tennessee that's got the slight risk tomorrow. And then as we get into the day on the 24th, Friday, it's going to push farther and farther off to the east, including this region and through here. Okay, so let's go have a look at it on the high-res NAM. Let's blow that up once. There we go. And let's get this queued up. So the latest run I have available to me when I record is the 6Z run. So we're picking this up around 7 a.m. in the forecast. So as that low curls out, expect some convection on the back side of it. This will be the area tonight, right in through here, where you need to keep a very close eye on the radar to see where these storms erupt. But I mentioned there's another system coming behind this, and here it is in the northwest. And so as we get into tonight and into early tomorrow morning, see the front lingering? Now watch this next system pull this into itself by the time we get into Thursday afternoon and evening. See that? Did you see the turn? Watch right in through here. Just gets pulled straight north, and that's why tomorrow evening we're going to watch this whole corridor right in through here for the risk of those strong to severe storms. Now you're going, well, I don't see anything on the model. I understand, but this will be the area that we're going to have to keep an eye on as we get into tomorrow as this next low comes out. Now, can this one fill in some of the gaps? Well, let's just kind of see here. This pulls right through the western Corn Belt again. I mean, if you just take a look at the risk of these stronger storms surviving possibly into the overnight hours, hitting these same regions. So we're recycling the moisture that's already in this place, plus adding Gulf moisture to it, while isolated storms continue to roll right in through this area here. And there have been some big ones that have been over in parts of the Carolinas and possibly getting up into Virginia. But lately, some big storms in the Carolinas. So what I'll be interested to see is this. Did you notice that too? Going through the overnight hours on Thursday into early Friday morning. See where the line's breaking up once again? It's that same trajectory. So this low, even though it came from here and is ending up there, this is kind of the same position the current one just went through, and it ends up in parts of Ontario. And as the models bring the frontal boundary through this region, there's something about it that's breaking it apart. Could it be that there's locally drier air there? Well, that's why we kind of went back and looked to see if there's not a good local source of moisture to add to the Gulf moisture. Or is it just a matter of the trajectory of these systems? Sorry, where was that? There we go. That as they pull over Minnesota, we get a breaking apart of the line. Plus, the timing is all wrong. It's late morning, and it's usually a more stable time of day. So I don't know. We're going to have to watch that trend very carefully, though. But from here, we're going to go back to our other big trend we're watching, which is this. Now, you know that for this whole month of May, we've had troughs that have lived here and here with a ridging in between, right? And this has sent low pressure systems out and around, and they've come right through the midsection of the United States. And we're still in that pattern. Ready? So through Thursday, look at that deep trough right there sneaking through. That's our next main severe weather risk. Getting into Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Watch the next one come barreling through here by Monday, Tuesday. What happens after that? Now, here we are 7 days from now. This is next Wednesday. And you can see a broader trough over the east. We see ridging coming in here. We still see troughs in this area, but we've now dipped one, breaking apart the ridge. One piece went this way. The model's still bringing in a little bit of higher heights into that area, but this is different. It's different, and we're just questioning, once we finish May, do we begin the month of June with just a little bit slower pattern? I'm not calling for, epic drought to settle in the month of June. I'm just looking for something that says it's not the way it was in May. That's what this whole narrative has been this week. And as we get out there to June 3rd, take a look at where the ridge is located. And the broader trough now sits where there has been ridging. I mean, you saw it a moment ago, right? I mean, there it is. That's the high we're talking about, displacing and moving. Well, as we get out there to about Monday the 3rd, I'm starting to get a sense of a bit more amplified flow, which would be slower because it's more meridional. And I think the pattern just backs off a little bit. I'm not calling for this to be bone dry. I'm just saying it's going to back off and shift away from the extremely active look, because instead of this being more zonal, pushing this trough into the United States, we go out there and see that it just lingers off the coast. And that's 2, 3, 4 days of lingering there, not diving across the country. And the more amplified this becomes, when I say amplified, I'm talking about north-south movement, the slower the entire pattern becomes. And we are just curious how this continues to manifest itself as we look out there beyond the next 2 weeks. So let's do this. Let's look at our next kind of 5 panels, which are 5 different models, looking at the next 7 days, and then I'll show you the week 2. So this is the AIFS, the Artificial Intelligence Forecasting System from the Europeans. No surprises here. Getting into the NBM, very similar look. Again, areas of concern. If you're west of that line, this is an area that's fine to go over dryer right now. Right now it is. Just get a little bit of a break given how wet things have been. But we have to watch this region. And I'll show you why a bit more in just a few seconds. This is the WPC forecast. So we can now identify, again, 3 models, all 3 putting down a very heavy corridor of rain here after the first system leaves. This is what the outlook is from the European model. Very similar outlook overall. And this is from the GFS. Now, what I'm concerned about here, I'm not sure why I had this up. Let's go to the next slide. There we go. What I'm concerned about here is that over the next 7 days, you notice there was an area in through here that's quite dry. And a few of you have reached out to me to discuss this, and I will respond in email to those that emailed me yesterday. I'll get back to you in a few moments here. But you can see that this area is now starting to show up with significant precipitation deficits, while immediately to the east of it, we're talking about too much wet weather right in through this area. And you can also see a wetter northern tier of the United States as well, and then getting over to the Great Lakes states into the northeast. That's the next 7 days. Look at week 2. We continue to see the models looking at a pattern that's got a trough in through here, some sort of ridging event there, and a broader trough into this area. And the reason why we get a corridor in through here that's wet is because if this ridge lives back farther to the west, it does draw in moisture. And you can initiate storms here on the heat of the day, no trouble. I mean, that's what the models are capable of the atmosphere is capable of doing. The models are picking up on it. But that would be what your week 2 pattern is currently looking like. Now, we're going to come back to this in a few seconds. But if you just look at the next 14 days on the whole, so that was week 1, week 2, this is all 14 days, looking at precipitation anomalies. I don't like this at all. This is going right back into this substantial drought risk, which we've been talking about for quite some time. And we need to get storms in through here. We need to see moisture returning to this area, meaning that the position of that ridge next week is critical. The farther west we can get it, the better the storms are going to be in this area. All right, here's the other piece I wanted to add to this. Next 7 days, according to the National Digital Forecast Database, what does our evaporation rates look like, total? And when we start to see coming out of New Mexico and western Texas, edging its way into Kansas, these rates between 1.5 inches and over 3 inches here in parts of New Mexico, this is much higher than average, indicating heat and wind and a lack of moisture in this area. And this is where we're starting to just worry about this risk of this being the region where drought begins to build early in the season on top of where it's already been. So let's get out there and kind of look at a couple of different things to see what the models are saying. And we'll look at some probabilities and then get on with the longer range. So let's play through the GFS on the left, European on the right. We've already seen pretty well from the models this look. And again, Friday morning with the temperatures that are going to be in this area, we do need to understand that you may see a snowflake in this early Friday morning. But this will be the next line of showers and storms that rolls through. The chance of them being severe is present in the model, so we're going to watch that carefully. That rolls through the Midwest. We see the storms moving to the east. We follow this with another system here in the midsection of the country. There it is. That's that last trough that comes through on Sunday to Monday, delivering a lot of rain into this area. So this would be Sunday into Monday. That one spreads over the Great Lakes. It leaves a front all the way down to the southeast and the south. And as we play into early next week, see a couple of things are going on here. This is when the ridge begins to build in. There's still a broader trough east. There's one front here. There's another front there. And so we could get some storms out of this, hitting some very wet areas, but the farther back to the west we can bring this moisture, the better. That's next Tuesday. Into Wednesday, Thursday. What's interesting is the European model drops another front here. The GFS leaves it a bit farther to the north. But like I said, even though we saw a drier go of it into week 2, it's not a no precipitation setup as we start to play up to that time frame, which would be the end of May. There's the beginning of June right there. This would be Friday night on May 31st. What we're going to be watching is this kind of shift away from the current pattern starting about right here. So that means that over the next 3 days, we're looking at the best chance of an inch of rain shown here. If I add in the 4 following days, this takes us out a week. And then if we look out there through 10 days, this is the chance over the next 10 days of getting an inch. Now we probably got a new model run here when I click on this. Yes, we did. So let's now flip back to that 0Z so we can look out there longer. And that's the chance over the next 10 days of staying under a ½ inch. And now I'm getting very concerned about this region. This is okay. We can take some time of having a little bit below normal precipitation. I'm just broadly speaking across this area given how wet it's been. But Florida, been having problems with heat and drought issues. No good here. Take a look at this part of the Canadian prairie showing up drier as well. So we just have to continue to weigh these things and monitor them as we go forward, especially as this potential shift in the pattern starts to take place. Remember the failure mode on this is that if the trough doesn't split that big ridge that's south of Alaska, none of this is going to happen. This is all going to be a terrible forecast. I feel more confident about it than I did 2 Mondays ago or 3 Mondays ago, but something to think about here. Okay, week 2. The CPC yesterday made a bit of a shift toward drier conditions in through here than it did the day before. And again, this is coming in with this pattern that's got a ridge here and a trough there. So remember, northwest flow in spring is drier. This is where the storms could sneak in on the underneath side of that ridge, but will be drier throughout the Rocky Mountains. Possibly wetter along the Pacific Northwest only because you're on the exit side of that trough. So this makes sense to me. Take note of the GFS though. Now, is the GFS really overdoing this? Possibly. But it is, there's some similarities week 2 with the CPC forecast. The European is just not as aggressive on it. Just want to make that point for those Southern Plains farmers that have been dealing with extensive drought. I'm thinking a lot about friends in Kansas. Okay, from there, frost. Now we had the frost threat here and here this morning, but we have more chances here in the northern plains going forward. So remember, we were worried that this was going to start to show up in the forecast. So this is this morning's lows. Let's blow that up once. There we go. This is getting into Thursday morning's lows. Quite cold throughout the northwest. Potential for some frost risk in parts of the Snake River Valley. Then this is Friday. See how cold this air is coming in here early morning? Again, another frost risk area there on Friday morning. Saturday morning, lows down here in the mid-30s. Keep an eye on this. This is cold. As we go into Sunday and Monday, we start to blow that out a bit. And the high temperatures look something like this. Here's today's highs, very cold in the northwest, hot in the northeast. This is Thursday, getting into Friday, so there's that cold air sweeping through, giving us that morning frost risk. We've got about a 55-degree swing in temperatures from the northern plains to the southern plains on highs on Friday. Triple digits just stay in the southern plains down here, this part of Texas. This is Saturday, getting into Sunday. Now watch the west. Monday, Tuesday. That would be the ridge that starts to build in toward the very end of the month. That brings some cooler air back into a broad section here of the Midwest, Great Lakes states, Northeast. And we wonder if that's going to stick around into the day 5 through 10 time period. First, I do want to show you how many GDDs are expected to be accumulated over the next 7 days. And with the colder air that keeps sinking through this area, we're not picking up very many. And we're getting concerned about planting delays in this area, that if we don't start picking up heat soon, this is going to be a major concern on a crop finishing, especially if there's any risk of an early frost, which it is way too early to talk about. But just take a look at the split. That's that boundary where you're going to be getting a lot of heat to the south and not so much to the north. Day 5 through 10, this is when the pattern is expected to start to make its shift. So jet stream doing something like this. And day 10 through 15, it's out there as well. And if we sustain the warmth in the west, this will be critical to understanding what the June pattern is going to be, because the GFS also shows the same thing that the European does. Here's the European forecast. Now, my last 4 slides here, I want to show you what I mentioned with the comparing of the longer range models. This is week 2. The GFS extended is doing the same thing the European is doing through the month of June, and that is to build in quite a bit of heat here. If you want to go look at it real quick with me, let's go to ECMWF extended, or the weeklies, and I can do the same thing. Ready? Here's week 2. Watch the models build in that warmth throughout the west. And if that sticks around during that time frame, we end up getting this precipitation pattern for the month of June. There's some sense to this. So a lot of this is coming early. Okay, we just talked about that. But overall, seeing a drier shift in these areas is quite possible given the heat that's coming into that area. What we can't predict are these daily thunderstorm events, but this is what the models are going after. To finish this up, I want to give you a bit on South America, where you can now see here on these 2 panels the next 5 days, and then day 5 through 10, where the cold air is coming up from parts of Argentina into Paraguay, Bolivia, and getting into southern Brazil. Oops, sorry about that. If we come up here and just have a look at the next 10 days of precipitation added up, what I want to take note of here is continued flooding, Uruguay, Rio Grande do Sul. But notice how the models are trying to bring more rain north of that, like Paraná, Mato Grosso do Sul, Sao Paulo. These places have safrinha crop that could get the benefit of these late season rains. Lastly, I want to show you a quick international forecast for the next 10 days. And again, we see drier parts of the Russian wheat belt. We see a lot of Australia going drier, very wet in Southeast Asia. We've talked about the pattern down here in South America. But what I think would be important to do as our last slide today is just to look at how this all compares to a year ago. So if you look at this map, these colors represent where the Vegetation Health Index, as measured by satellite, is lower than it was a year ago. This is better. So if I click on the map, you get a larger view of it. There's the U.S. What I'm really focusing on here is actually more about Mexico. As you come across and go farther to the south, much better in Argentina, but notice this area through here showing some degradation compared to a year ago. In Europe, that is the spot we're watching. India, worse, and Australia. Now remember, if we just do broad brush strokes, it's here and it's here that we do a lot of the agriculture in Australia. That's very roughly drawn. But I just want to take note of where the Vegetation Health Index values are lower than they were a year ago. So with that, I'm going to stop. Take a good day. We'll talk again tomorrow morning. Thanks.